Alrighty, welcome to everybody to the second class, class one actually. We start with zero from the little Python course. All right, so I'm gonna change everybody. I'm gonna change the format a little bit. Instead of going through every single line of the code, I'm gonna just highlight some things that I think we should know. I'm gonna add some details that are not in the book, and then we can talk about questions. I saw on the Discord asking like, when will I use sleep, or when will I use that? That also are good questions. When will you use these tools for, in what context? So we can ask some of those, and the floor can, if they want to participate in, everybody wants to give their opinions. I know there's folks here that know a lot of coding, and I appreciate you being here. Even though this is a basic class, it helps me as the semi-instructor here, so you can augment my ignorance with your knowledge. So make it go away, my ignorance. All right. So the things I want to highlight, the first is we're going to cover kind of half of the pages that were discussed. The other half we'll cover it on Thursday. And I want to do a quick review. And if you're on page 14, that's the first bullet points from the chapter. 14? No. 13, 14. Yep. No, I lied. Where is it? Where is it? There we go. Page 19. All right. So we discussed that last time. Just quick summary. We have the control structures here, the if and the else's. If this condition is met, is it true or false? If it's true, it will execute this block of code. In Python, it's called a suite. If it's not, then else, it will execute this other block or suite of code. And not sweet as in like candy, but sweet, like, like a collection of. Okay, so the controls, we got in there. And if we have more conditionals, we can use one that's called elif or elif, and then continuous else if, and then an else. And sometimes we might just do if by themselves, depending on what you want to do. Okay, that's a summary from last time. Last time, we learned about importing, okay? And this is something I want to highlight here because it gave me, I was a little bit confused when I went learning my little bit of Python that I know. Okay, and I'm gonna show that now to you. The book was mentioning about importing the whole module or importing just a function within that module. And what does that mean, right? In this case, if you're importing the module, like here, like time, if you want to access any functionality within time, you need to call it by saying, hey, from time dot, the little dot notation, I want the functionality called sleep inside of time. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. Same thing with random, right? I gotta say, I want from random, I want the function or the functionality inside of it called randint, random integer. Okay? Easy peasy, that's how we did it for this exercise. Now, what happens if we, instead of doing it this way, we're gonna say, like on the top, from time import sleep. You notice that? Now I'm actually importing the function directly. Therefore, for me to be able to call it, to use it, I don't need to say it's from time. Does that make sense? Let's see if that works. Command, if you're in a Mac like me, Command S to save, and then function F5 to execute. And it starts running. You saw what I did here? So you have this option. You can import the module itself or the libraries, whatever, and then you have to, by using the dot notation, call out what you need from it. Or you can say, hey, from time, I want just to import from this library only sleep. And you can import more. You can put comma and another function, comma and another function. And think of functions as little blocks of code in that library that do things for you, and you can call them as you need them, right? And the way to call functions is the name of the function and parentheses, and what you put inside of these parentheses depends on the function, right? Depends on how do you manipulate it. These are called arguments, okay? And then when you call the function, it's a method call. You're calling it to do stuff for you, okay? And actually, I was not gonna say that, but let's do it. So let me show you something real quick here. If you're not sure how to manipulate a function, and I think the book covered it, we can use the help within the interpreter itself. Just literally write help, and let's put randint. Oops, I hit caps by accident. Randint, random integer. And let's see what it gives you. Oops, I wrote it wrong. What do I need to? I think it's random.randint. Hold on. If I, instead of trying to remember off the top of my head, I look at my notes, that would be way better, right? So, by the way, this is one way of doing it. My preferred way is just to Google things, to be honest with you. I think it's faster because, at least for me, it's easier to understand. I think I had to put the whole random because it's the whole library. Yeah. All right, so there's random, and then we can go through it. But this is kind of like a big one. Let's use the one that the book uses is really long, so explains everything about that functionality. But how about we use the one for the example for range, which is the one the book gives. It's a little bit smaller, easier to digest. When you use help, it tells you, okay, look, help range has a start argument, a stop argument, and a step argument. All right. And the step here is, it's optional. And you read this whole thing when you go into the book, right? So you can get help to figure out what the different functions do when you're calling them. Hopefully that made sense. I'm gonna go back to how the exercise was originally so we can keep working. But again, you can import your whole module or library and then using dot notation call what you need. Or you can say, hey, for this module, I only want this particular function and that's it. So the question is, well, when will I do one versus the other, right? It depends on you as a coder. I usually like this way better because I think it's more efficient when I'm selecting specifically what I want. And I also have to type less. I just put sleep and it accesses it. But sometimes you might need it. And when would that be? Well, imagine you have two libraries and then both have a function called sleep that do different things. How would the interpreter know if you're importing the functions directly? How would the interpreter know which sleep to reference, right? Is it sleep this one or sleep the other one? Then you would need to use the dot notation so it knows from this library A, I want sleep, versus from library B, I want the sleep function, for example. It's kind of made up, but hopefully that makes sense. Okay? And if it doesn't make sense, put it on the chat or something and hopefully, or just call it out. Feel free to talk. Don't, by no means think it's just a monologue. If you want to say, Alex, that makes no sense, let me know. All right, so let me go back to where I was. Okay, there we go. So, all right, for the next example, I want to show you something. I'm going to change my random from 1 to 60 seconds, like from integer 1 to 60 to 5 to make it run faster, okay? By the way, everybody understood what this function does, right? This library and the function in it, right? It selects a random integer from 1 to whatever you decided. In this case, I minimized it 1 to 5 because I want when my code runs, I want to run a little faster. I don't want to. Let me even ask the group, right? Think about it. Think as an interpreter. As coders, we need to think as the interpreter. If I have this random generation from 1 to 60, right? And my code, based on what we did for homework, right, goes from those five iterations of it, right? How long? So I don't know. Yeah. How long will at max will the runtime for this code be, right? And just think about it. It goes from 1 to 60. So if by happenstance every selection is a minute, it will run 5 minutes or whatever it is, right? So in order for it to run faster, I'm going to put 5. So at most, it will run for 20 seconds. All right, that's that. Now, I'm going to show you something that I think is super useful. It was discussed a little bit in the Discord channel. It's not covered in the book, but I think it's a good moment to show it. It's called F strings, all right? And what is an F string? When you see here, right, this sentence within quotations, this is a string. The fact that it's in quotations means it's a string, means that it's just a collection of characters. That's it. If I put the letter I, it just stands for an I, in ASCII character, for example. And if you see here, it's between this, it's between the parentheses for the function called print. And what print does, and we've seen it already, is just sends stuff to the screen, okay? So you can read whatever, like a message, call out. Okay, now, F strings is a variation of how we're gonna work with strings. You're gonna put an F right before your string that's, encasing double quotations or quotations in whatever it is in this case. With this F, now the interpreter knows that I can access any variable on my script within the string by placing it between brackets. And you're like, I don't know what the heck you just said, Alex. And that's okay, let me show you. I want to keep track of how many runs are we doing, like a count or every time the code executes. So I'm going to put run number, and inside of it, I'm going to put an I. And I'm going to put here my colon here. There we go. So what did I just do here? Perfect. What did I just did it at here? I have an extra, yeah. So now I have an F string. I put the word run and run number, and now here within this brackets, this I is a variable. Where is this I as a variable defined before in our script? Right here. Now it's not an I like a letter, just a letter that you read on a sentence. Now it's a variable, and since it's a variable, it will show me the contents within the letter I as a variable here on my string. By the way, quick pause. If you see here, we have no numbers on our lines. Go to options, show line numbers, and it makes your life so much easier, right? Mm-hmm. So always try to have your numbers there. So here on line 10, the variable I, now we can access it here and actually show the contents to the screen when we call print. So let's run it and see what happens. You saw that? Run 0. And we give it a few seconds and run 1, right? And I mentioned this last class. In Python and most programming languages, when you start counting, you don't start by 1. You start from 0. And that's important to keep track of. Because if you want something to run from 4, to stop at 5, then you need to make sure it's smaller than 6 while you're counting, right? Tell it, hey, I want everything that's small, up to, but not including 6. If not, it's going to happen, right? Notice it goes from 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Did the code run 5 times? It did, right? But our counting goes from 0 forward. So just keep that in mind, okay? So did that make sense? With an F string, you can access the contents of variables when you print them out really easily. And it's super, super neat. I love using F strings. I use it all the time. Maybe a D, for example. So, for example, in Androids, and iPhones too, but for my example, Androids, there can be more than one user in an Android device, right? And they're not usually, the way Android handles them is like binary. So the first user is user 0, the second user is 1, 0, 1, and then binary, right? And as a binary number. When I want to parse data from Android, I will have, for certain artifacts, the same artifacts for user 0, or one user, and the same artifacts from another user, right? So how do I differentiate? Well, in my code, I make sure that I put user, and with an F string, user number, and then my variable that lets me know which user it is. And then for the other one, same thing. And so when it runs, it tells you user number 0, or user number 1, or user number 3 in binary, or I convert it, whatever. So there's a lot of functionality you can use with the F strings. You use it all the time. And I think it's fantastic, and I love it. There's other ways of formatting strings, but we'll discuss that moving forward. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We run the code there. All right. Another thing I want to highlight is the sleep function. And I think Paul or somebody else asked in Discord, when will I use sleep? And that's a great question. Usually when you have to use sleep is because you want to slow down the execution of your code. You might need to wait for something to be done before you keep processing or doing things. If at least for the mobile forensics that I like doing, I try to avoid using sleep. I try to make sure that my code is able to keep up with whatever I'm doing. And if I find myself that I need to write a lot of data to a place that I need to use sleep to kind of wait and hold for something to happen, I try to rethink my approach, and I try not to use sleep too much. But you might find functionalities in other contexts, like the example that was given in the Discord. Hey, maybe you need to move a lot of data to a place before you continue. Then you might use sleep and say, hold on, stop processing, wait until it's done. Because if you process without it being done, we're going to get an error, for example. So that's another way you can use sleep. All right, and last thing I wanted to highlight here, and just to reaffirm that, method calls, right? And errors when you have a method call. Pretty much troubleshooting. Like I mentioned, I like everybody to type. I need you to type your code. Don't copy paste it. Don't download the code. Type it. Why? Imagine that I wrote random.radient as opposed to randint. And that could happen. I mean, we could just not notice that we're missing a letter, right? What happens when we make a mistake like this? So let's run it. Let's see what happens when an error happens. What happens when an error happens? All right. It's in red, kind of scary, but no need to be scary. It tells you on line 17, and good thing we put our line numbers, right? Line 17, on this line, there's a problem. What's the problem? Module random has no attribute radient. And like, what does that even mean? The module that we imported, which is random, right? There is no function called radient in it, right? And attribute is another word for it, and that's the word the interpreter uses, right? So when you see this error, don't be afraid. Most likely there's some mistake on your typing right here, and that's what this error means. And you'll see multiple errors as you progress on your coding expertise. And sometimes when you look at the error, you're like, oh, I know what it is. And you might even know where it is without looking at the line, just by looking at the attribute error. And you'll get used to some of those errors. So this is one that happens to me a lot if I'm calling a function using the dot notation here, an attribute, and I wrote it wrong. This is what happens. So change it, and when you change it, it will resolve that error. Oops, wrong one. And I want you to commit errors. I want you to feel. There we go. Then it runs no problem. I want you to get used to seeing the errors and troubleshooting them. When you see an error, it's not that your idea, the logic of your code might be wrong. It might be just that you typed it wrong, and that's it, right? And as we go through it, we'll also, and this is an error called syntax error, right? We wrote something wrong. Oh, another example of a syntax error. Let's say you wrote your if, and you forgot the colons, right? You just forgot it, just kept going. What happens? It tells you, you saw that, invalid syntax, and it highlighted here. You might also get the error expecting a colon. It doesn't show it here, but depending on the one you're using, the IDE you're using, it will tell you, hey, I'm expecting a colon or semicolon, whatever it is. It's not here. Where is it? See that? So when you see this red, then you're like, oh, okay, I'm missing something here, right? Hopefully everybody gets that. Don't be afraid of committing errors. I want you to commit errors, so that way you actually learn. And the more errors you commit, you're easier to troubleshoot, and eventually those errors, you can go through like 200 lines of codes, and you're hitting like, wow, it just ran. No errors. But that comes with practice and with some time. All right, so that's covered. And lastly, like I said, when we have the module, we call the function, the results are going to be placed inside your variable. Okay, so I'm going to add a little bit more here. I want to say, I want to see how many seconds. I want to explore what's inside wait time. And this is not in the book, but I'm just telling you this to kind of get you used to manipulating variables and kind of inspecting what's in it. So value inside wait time is going to be, let me see here. No, not wait time. I should, this is, I'm a dummy here. Oh, 1 second. This will not execute because this happens before this. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit here, just to make my point. So just bear with me. Okay, now it's gonna work. Hopefully you saw why I did that, and I'm gonna explain if that didn't make sense. I'll explain it. All right, there we go. Now it's gonna work. Again, think like the interpreter. All right, there we go. And I don't need this space here. I mean, it's gonna run with it, but there we go. All right, so let's save it and let's run it. All right, so as you can see here, the first random integer that was picked was 1. The next one, when we call the function, the random integer was 4. The next one, the random integer was 5, and then look, by happenstance, it picked 4 again. All right, and 1 or whatever. All right, so the main teaching point is you can expect, like any variable, what the contents are using a quick print. That's an easy way of doing it. And you'll find yourself when you're coding, you're like, this math or this thing is not, I'm looking for a path and I'm not sure if I'm getting the correct path inside this variable. Well, do a print and send it to screen and see, oh, look, I'm having a mistake here. This is not path, or maybe my addition of the 2 variables is wrong. I don't know. But inspect the contents using print. Really easy, okay? Now, why did I move this from the bottom up? Remember, your interpreter will go from top to bottom. If I ask the interpreter to give me a value that hasn't been assigned, hasn't been defined, it will complain. It will tell me, what the heck are you doing? That makes no sense. So again, let me show you the errors so you can start getting used to seeing errors and handling them. All right, and I'm gonna edit this to show you the error. Again, we go from top to bottom. So I needed to have a value inside wait time before I call it to show it. If there's nothing to show, it will give me an error, okay? And that will be the end of the class for today. So, okay, I want this to be outside of the else because I want to execute every single time, right? And now, notice this. Now I'm saying, hey, give me the value inside wait time, but I haven't put anything inside wait time yet. It's put here. When the module and the function call, the method call is made, the value then gets assigned to wait time, not before. So it's gonna complain. So let me show you what that error is. And you will see this error in your code. It happens to me all the time when I'm thinking that I have the right value, but I have it in the wrong place. So let's run it. Error named wait time is not defined. You saw that in line 15. We're gonna confirm it in line 15. Okay, so whenever you want to show the content of a variable that has nothing defined in it, then it's going to give you an error, right? And to be clear, nothing is not like zero is something, spaces is something. Does that make sense? If I do this, for example, wait time equals a space. Is there something aside to wait time if I do this? Yes. Right, so a space is not, a space is something, a 0 is something. So don't forget that. Even a null is something, and we'll talk about that in the future, right? When I say nothing, what that means is it's not defined, and nothing is a bad word. That's why the interpreter doesn't use it. But I'm trying to kind of correlate it with words that we're used to, right? The nothingness is actually things that are not defined. We don't know what it is because there's nothing in it. Okay, and now this will also generate, might generate an error, right? At some point. Well, maybe not this code, but if you're assigning something incorrectly, then it might have an error, right? So. And I think, actually, let's run this just to see what happens. I'm just kind of curious. I didn't run it, so let's see what happens. You saw that? Interesting, right? And you're like, huh, Why can I see what the values for my numbers are? They didn't pick a number. Oh, it did. But remember, it goes from top to bottom. Wait time has nothing in it, nothing but a space in it. See, I got to correct myself. And it goes and it shows you that space. And then what it does is assign the new number, goes up here, and then what does it do? Reassigns a space to it. So it overwrites it in a sense, right? Let's say it picks second one, we go here, it just takes it away because we reassign it. And remember, it's a loop, right? We're going execute this big block of code here 5 times. So as it's looping through it, like going top, bottom, top, bottom, top, bottom. This reassignment is deleting the assignment, not deleting, but rewriting the assignment that we did down here. Think as the interpreter, and it will. That's pretty much coding. Trying to figure out what the interpreter will do if I write things a certain way. And that's what I got for today. Is any questions? Anybody wants to vocalize so we can record them? If not, I'll stop the recording. Do you see anybody, Brooke? I don't see anybody.
I'll ask one that was on that was in the chat, and I posted on Discord as well. But the question was just about sort of clarification on the utility of the DIR function versus the help function. Like when we use like dir, dir. Whatever.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So the good thing about the DIR function is that tells you all the functions inside something, right? Let me see. I think the book did it with again, I'm gonna off the top of my head, so I might misspell this. There we go. So it tells you all the different functions that you can use. Where's the randint? Should be here. Here we go. Randint. Oh, sorry about that. There we go. So randint is right here. So at least you know, and I like this a lot because then I can go and just Google randint straight up. Whereas when you use the help one, it gives you way more details about how to use that module or how to use that function. So there we go. Help. Random variable generator gives you the name. It's documentation, description. Pick a random element. Does that make sense? So you can get like a man page when you're using Linux or a help page in Windows. And then you can go class by class, random, whatever it is, and go through all of them. I mean, the class and then the functions within the class, I should say. Yeah, so that's why. So usually I find it easier. This is me. And other coders way more experienced than me may be like, oh man, you're such a noob. But I like, honestly, I just go like, if I go dir and I put, what was it? Random, like I did. Random. I can't type today. And then int, and I just Google it. It's on the way of my Googling, but Python int. There you go. And then I look for the help, you know, and the good thing I like about the help that you get on Google is that, you know, usually see it gives you code examples here from the documentation you can find online. So you can see how it used. If I call random with no arguments, what do I get? If I call, you know, random and different functionalities with it, it'll give you examples of that. So that's why. That's a big difference. The naming of the functions that you can use, and then I would just Google them to see exactly what they do and see some code examples of how I'm going to use them. And to be honest, straight honest, if I'm like, I need a random number, I'm not going to even do that, because what if I have no knowledge of the random module or library? I'm like, I don't know that exists. Literally, I just go, how to get a random number in Python. Apparently it's kind of popular here, how to execute it. Oh, look, random. And it takes you to the documentation we were looking at before. Oh, there's a random library to do that, and you can read it, right? So that's how in real life it goes. You're like, I need something to generate randoms. I need something to put the Python script to wait for a few seconds while something happens. I want to have how can I make a list of numbers in Python, or a list of addresses? Or how do I open a file in Python? I might not know how to open, what the library to open files in Python is. Actually, I mean, I know it now, but when I started, I didn't know it. I just Googled it. And then you can go through the documentation and see the examples to execute it. So hopefully that answered the question.
And then another thing, it's more of an idea than a question, but a really good idea is somebody in Discord recommended that there's a pinned post with a list of useful links. So if anyone has anything in addition to geeksforgeeks.org and Stack Overflow, if anyone has any other links that they would think are helpful, maybe post in the Zoom chat and or on Discord, and we can compile something, or just tweet us afterwards or something.
Okay, I think Andrew from Discord gave me access to pin stuff, so I'll start doing that. I'll start going through it and put it on the Discord chat, and I'll pin him. I'm not really sure how to do it yet, but I know I have the ability. I just need to figure out how to do it. So I'll do it when we're done here. All right, I'm gonna stop recording then.